Welcome to Uncover the Human, where every conversation revolves around enhancing all the connections in our lives.
Whether that's with our families, coworkers, or even ourselves.
When we can be our authentic selves, magic happens. This is Alex Cullimore.
And this is Cristina Amigoni.
Let's dive in. Welcome back to this episode of Uncover the Human. It's a host episode. Cristina and I are here today to talk about facilitation and training and some of the importance that we've noticed in training and how it's either missed sometimes before we do it or the enjoyment people seem to get after it. There's so much that happens with training, and there's so much that's been a joy to experience in both bringing facilitation and training facilitators for particularly during changes. So it's a very broad topic.
Because we usually go narrow.
Yeah, we only specify one narrow thing, and then we never discuss anything else. There's no tangents.
And there's never tangents. We stay on point.
Well, let's talk a little bit, I guess, about why this is coming up currently. We have a leadership program, which we did, which was really, really fun to do. Got a lot of great feedback out of it, iterated and built that for over a year, started to transition that internally, and now pieces of it are being used in different ways within a few organizations. And so we have pieces of this growing, and we're training people to deliver some of it. And one thing that's been really fun is seeing the journey of people learning to facilitate trainings, watching people get into like thinking that it's mostly about knowing what slide is next and exactly what you're going to say, and then finding out that when you're in front of a live audience, it's just almost a free-for-all because that audience is going to react entirely different than you expect. You could do the same training each time and have a totally different reaction in different portions, and the room will feel very different. And watching people both navigate that, get nervous coming up to it, and then have we've had a lot of people, thankfully I think there's been good selection committees on who's going to try these things. The people get a lot of joy out of doing it. And one of the notes we notice a lot is people saying, I really learned the material so much better for having taught it. You just know it at a different level when you have to convey it.
Yeah. I mean, we've gotten so many great comments from the facilitator point of view, and from people that this was very much outside of their role or outside of their normal job, and they stepped in a very short time and made the material personal for them, and just took the leap and figure out, like, can I do this as a facilitator? And am I going to be able to create the experience that I want people to have in the room? And anything from realizing that the facilitation piece and what makes the experience is really bringing the information to life. And as you said, it's not about memorizing the script or what's on the slide. It's about truly living what the information is. And then having faith, having trusting the process, that if we understand it enough, we can bring it to life in our own way, which is going to be completely different than somebody else's way. And it is completely different even from our own way the day before or in a different setting because of that live audience, of that understanding what's happening with the audience with that piece of information.
And I think that does increase your understanding. Not only do you have to like know it pretty well so that you can have an idea of what to respond to when people have curveballs, but the second people have curveballs, it then develops your own understanding of it. They interpret it this way. You're like, oh, I've never thought of it that way. Here's a response to that. You can open it up to the group. You get a full discussion going, and it's incredible how much greater the understanding is, not just for the people learning the information, but for yourself as a facilitator. If you're doing it kind of the way that we would prescribe, and we try and help people bring to life, which is creating a lot of space, putting the information out there, giving people chances to interact with it, because the whole point is to have them interact and feel that. And that's something that we have noticed has become increasingly important in changes. When organizations make changes, when people assume new roles, where you create a new role out of nowhere, where people are stepping into that, or where other departments have to now work with that, or it's just rather than just being an idea, and then people are trying to implement that idea, it is a huge portion of that activation phase is getting people to understand, what are you really training? And what as we do that more, when people really start to say, here's what we're trying to convey, here's the behaviors we want people to have, it is in sometimes formal and sometimes informal ways, different levels of training. You're trying to reinforce and get buy-in and get people to understand a set of behaviors that they will hopefully carry forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you touched on the exact piece that it's important to understand, especially when you do build a training and you try to figure out what the outcome is going to be, is that every change is a behavioral change. It doesn't matter what it is, it's still a behavioral change. And so, one of the things that we bring when we help organizations and teams think through, we have this new framework or we have this new way of doing things and we need people to understand and also adopt it, is it's not the actual content, it's not the skills, especially today with between Google and ChatGPT and everything else. The skills themselves don't need facilitations to actually be learned. It's really, what's the behavior that you're trying to change? What is the behavior that you want to see after this? And so it's really switching that point around. And I was working on Monday with one of the teams that we are helping out on their training plan. And seeing that way, he was sharing how it completely shifted how they were going to deliver the training, because they're now minimizing the actual templates and the skills and the information, and they're maximizing that personalizations, that understanding. If this is the framework in the training, in person, in the room, we're going to work on how's your behavior today aligned with that? How is not aligned with that? And what do you need to switch that? How does it make sense for you? What's the behavioral journey for you to be able to take this framework and make the most out of it so that your day and your job and your role and what you're trying to do as a team has better outcomes.
I think it's a great way of categorizing it because it does come back to behaviors and it has helped people change that entirely. And when you think about like changing people's behaviors, it then helps us get the framework that you need to have to help people understand what they would want to do in a behavioral change. So you have to have a really strong, compelling why they would all change their behaviors. Why would they do something different? Why when it's extra brain tax and you're in the middle of already being busy with five other things, why would you take this on? Why would you do these things? And it helps again then create the framing of like, here's why, here's what we're aiming for as an outcome. Here's the behaviors we expect to help that, rather than here's a template. So make sure you fill out that template. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe that template helps create the structure of the behavior, but if you haven't listed the why, if you haven't understood the end
Mhm.
goal, then people aren't going to see the template as much more than another piece of bureaucracy, something to fill out, something that has to be done. If you're just maybe for a performance review, maybe just because people might get angry if you don't do it, but they don't
Mhm.
necessarily see the point, and they haven't changed necessarily behaviors. They're just obeying some choice, some template, some process,
Mhm.
more than understanding like behaviorally how can I best adapt just to get to the outcomes based on the stated goal and why.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I never thought about this before. I haven't thought about this for a long time because in college I did a lot of tutoring in math
Mhm.
because math is just what I ended up studying, and
Mhm.
I always enjoyed tutoring. And now that I think about it in this light, it was always the fun part was that you were training um, ways of thinking. You were training behaviors of how
Yes.
to approach a problem,
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
like yes, there
Mhm.
were there were discrete
Mhm.
patterns you had to recognize or types of problems. There's discrete like steps to take, and knowing that knowing just different algebraic steps, different
Mhm.
calculus, different whatever pieces. There are formulas you do have to kind of
Yeah.
know to use, but it was more about you'd see the light bulbs go off when people started to understand the concepts of like, oh, this is how these all relate, and then they can apply it in
Yes.
different ways. It wasn't just here's the problem at hand. It was here's how to think about the problem at hand. Here's how to think
Yeah.
in the larger scale. How can you pull on the things you already know? How can you just notice these patterns if you know what this is doing,
Mhm.
like at the base level? If you don't understand what is happening, what these formulas mean, suddenly it's a lot easier to apply. And it was really fun to see some of those light bulb moments where people would connect with something that seems as we sometimes categorize anyway as so black
Mhm.
and white and as just step by step procedural as math can be. And when you actually take it to the abstract level, something people could understand, could catch up when they felt like they had fallen behind on a year or years of math, and could just relate to something and see it in a different
Mhm.
way. And it was really fun to spend the time just coming up with different ways of understanding concepts so that people would then relate to how to apply the concept. And it
Mhm.
was still behaviorally changing because it was about how are you going to approach a problem, not how do you do a
Mhm.
calculus problem? How do you
Mhm.
approach the ideas behind this? How do you understand this? How do you think about it? What are different ways so that you can, the next time you're thrown a problem and you don't have your tutor with you and you're in the middle of an exam, you can still apply these and you can do this well.
Mhm. Yeah. And also taking it even a bigger step, as you are tutoring and teaching how to approach a problem, it doesn't have to be a math problem.
Yeah.
It could be
Oh, for
any
sure
type
not.
of problem. There's
Yeah.
the application now becomes part of life. Like this is how I look at any type of problem.
Yeah. What references materials do I have? How well do I understand the
Hmm.
concepts? What can I do with it? And we get to do the really fun stuff now, of just like human behavioral change. And with our leadership program is geared towards how do you need to show up as a human,
Hmm.
which is always just fun, abstract, and connects to everybody's experience all the time.
Hmm.
They connect that to life usually without our prodding and helping, and so there's
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah.
So we have those pieces, but it is always that like you're teaching some ideas on how to approach essentially life, and
Yes.
even that's why I bring up the math example because I think we can box math so easily into
Yes.
like that's a very discrete subject. It's a very
Yeah.
like black and white idea of like you
Hmm.
get a right answer, you get a wrong answer. Like yeah, theoretically, and
Yes.
it's more about how you're thinking.
Yes. Yeah. It's absolutely how you're thinking. And so when thinking about that journey through a change, or because just there's something new that people need to be learning or would benefit, is really taking a step back from the content itself. What we've always said, especially when training new facilitators, is that it's really 90% facilitation and 10% of the content, whether this is going to be successful or not. The content
Hmm.
itself, just, put a prompt in ChatGPT and you'll get the content in 5 minutes. That's
Yes, it
not
was as
what's
easy as reading that. It'll be
yes.
done in a second.
Yeah, that's not what the training should be about, because the content is the content. It's how can you create that experience for people to see themselves doing something differently in the future.
And that's, I think, what where it can be. This thought would be really helpful in any type of organizational change
Mhm.
because when you're thinking about just as something as seemingly I don't know, you might not think you need a training for we're just now this department's doing something a slightly different way, or now we have a new role. Yeah, you might think you would have to train that role, but maybe it's a role that was, oh well, they were already basically doing that job. We're just changing a little bit of their job description. And you'll hear that all over the place. But what does that
Mhm.
mean for the people who are relating to it? What does that mean for that? And
Yes.
it becomes a training because and it should be I think maybe thought of that way, or maybe it would be
Hmm.
helpful to think about it that way from the executive point of view. Because if you can actually think about how you would train somebody to do that, you're going to have a much better idea of what you're looking for. So now you've got way better chances of success
Hmm.
already because you're going to have so much more clarity, as well as your ability to convey that to people and interact when you're if you were able to convey that, even if you're not the one giving the training
Hmm.
to the people, if you're able to give that to the people that will be giving that or will be
Yes.
doing the more on the ground
Hmm.
interactions with the people, that's when you have that deeper understanding and now everybody can be better aligned and it's not because
Hmm.
it was succinctly stated, it was not because you had a specific PowerPoint, it's not because everything was
Hmm.
communicated exactly according to
Hmm.
process of the VP announces it, the directors announce it to their people, whatever else. It's not that there's exact procedure for it, it's that everybody viscerally has to understand enough to have
Yeah.
explained it to somebody else. And so if you've gotten to that
Yes.
point of explanation and training and knowing something so well that you viscerally are just trying to help people interact with what has to happen, you've got clarity. You can
Yeah.
get the buy-in. You can have the people understand
Hmm.
exactly what they're meant to do and get people
Hmm.
excited about it. Get people in the same room. Get people ready to
Hmm.
do this together. Get people understanding it from everybody's point of view
Hmm.
and have a much better fleshed out change. I think this is something that could be incredibly helpful to consider for any type of organizational change. Even if you don't think
Yeah.
you need a formal training, think of
Yeah.
it as training
Yes.
behavior.
Yes. It's trained behavior. It's trained new behavior. If you didn't need new behavior, you wouldn't need the change. It's that simple.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a behavioral change, and it's amazing. Even the the ripple effects of something like that are felt in different ways. Especially when you do start giving people the chance to step up into this new role as facilitators, whether it's a 1 hour thing or a 3 day thing or anything in between, of facilitating an experience to help people change whatever behavior that is needed. But that also provides the example of, especially when it's internal and that's not a typical role for some of the people that are stepping into that facilitator role, they see it could inspire others to step outside of their comfort zone because they see their peer, their manager, their friend in a completely different way and doing something completely different. And then they're like, oh, wow, if he can do it, maybe I can too. And that's
Mhm.
where innovation is born because now you're thinking innovatively because you're thinking like, wow, and it doesn't have to be training related or change related. This could be anything. Like, wait, like if there's success and this is making an impact by doing something completely differently, I have this idea. I wonder if I could actually step into that and try it out.
Yeah. I really like that. That's a great point. The the social portion of that can't be understated. Like the noticing of what how different your peer is, or just hearing from peers who are going through the same hour-long training, 3-day training, whatever, or just seminar, lunch and learn, whatever you've got going on. I think that's there's a huge benefit to understanding and seeing people in a different light.
Yeah.
And I think there's something exciting and people can maybe hopefully get to enjoy some of the challenge when you see some of the benefits in having to understand a topic enough to be able to play and flex with it.
Yeah.
Like if you are
Yeah.
just trying to help people understand what active listening is and maybe encouraging them to try it out and use it, then you have to understand what you really mean by active listening. What does that look
Hmm.
like? What are examples you can bring to it? How you have to listen really deeply to the people. This is a double-edged example. You always, as a facilitator, have to listen really deeply to what people are coming up with because then you can
Yes.
relate to what either their
Yeah.
block is before they can
Hmm.
understand it or whether they feel like it's possible. And when you know something that well, like that's the same idea behind any organizational change. How many times have you been part of something where they announce a process and you're like, yeah, but that doesn't fit in this edge case. Yeah, but that doesn't fit when I'm like, well, I'm trying to do this. I can't decide
Hmm.
whether that falls in the process or out of the process. Like always you end up finding all these edge cases, which is
Hmm.
why you should be doing a lot of interviews before announcing anything for one,
Yes,
but also
that would
why,
help.
yeah, you're never going to catch all the edge cases,
Yeah.
even then. So you're going to
Yeah.
get
If
this either
it's
way.
90% edge cases and 10% standard, maybe that's not the right way to go.
Maybe it's not a change and maybe it's not an announcement. Maybe that's just
Yes.
those 10%.
Yes.
But if you can understand something well enough to understand the why, you should be able to address those edge cases and in
Yes.
collaboratively. Like yeah,
Yeah.
this is the fun part of facilitating is when somebody comes up with a challenge and you now have to phrase it in a new way that absorbs
Hmm.
this
Yes.
challenge to it or understand it or it expands what this thing that you're trying to say could be or it narrows the focus to like, oh yeah, that would apply in that case. So let's think about this for other cases, whatever it is. But if you're able to do that as a leadership team, how much easier would it be to do change? Every time people are coming up with
Hmm.
a challenge to it, it would be much easier for even totally different people on a leadership team to have an answer that will still bring about consistency towards the goals that you're looking, the behavioral changes that you're aiming to make.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and we've talked about this in the past. One of the biggest shifts that happens from change resistance and rigidity to change agility is when, as a leader, you're not even the one bringing the change anymore. It's like the people are so agile to change and they're feeling so free to be able to improve the things that they are experiencing are not going well that they will even bring up those issues. They'll bring up something that needs to change because they're experiencing it as a resistance of not being able to do their work well. And so that's one of the best moments as a leader is when you have a team come to you and say like, hey, we've noticed that this is not working the way it should, and we're not getting the right outcome, or it's not as efficient, and we're thinking of doing it this way, and we need this from you. Can we do it? And can you provide this support? So now that's change agility. Now you're not even imposing change.
Yeah, you got change brought to you. You're just helping trying to
Exactly.
move roadblocks, and everybody moves faster.
Yes. And knowing that it's feeling that on the receiving end. I remember when especially in our last company, I had a great manager and I was put in that position to say like, hey, I'm gonna point the problem. You go figure out what needs to be done in that problem. And then you tell me what I need to move out of the way and what I need to support you on that. But it wasn't really about, I want you to do it exactly this way. It was really the opposite. And for a lot of things, it was like, oh, if I could do it there and I have the freedom and the support to not be alone with knowing somebody has my back when I inevitably go down the wrong path, I can then notice the other problem and be like, hey, can we do something about this? Because that's also not working. And that change agility now expands and that confidence expands.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great example of change agility because we don't. I think any aware leadership team would happily tell you that getting buy-in is one of the hardest parts of change.
Yes.
If they're bringing you the change, buy-in's there.
Buy-in is
They're
there.
trying to get your buy-in now
Yes. Yes. The buy-in is there.
instead of you trying to sell them on something that is difficult to sell. Like they've already brought up a
Yes.
potential solution because they're bought into just making something successful. And
Yes.
that there's a high-performing team. There's an agile team.
Yeah.
I don't mean
Yeah.
the software sense. I mean just change agile sense.
Yes. Change agile team. Yep. So yeah, so think about this through the next change.
Yeah, think about behavioral change, think about training, think about the
Yes.
benefits of thinking of things as trainings, even if you're not
Yes.
doing a formal training.
Yes. And also, as soon as the change is happening, so that timing is crucial. Giving somebody a whole new role and then a year later realizing that maybe they should be taught how to do that role, it's a little late. But giving somebody a new role and then immediately, as soon as possible, giving them the tools and the support to succeed in that role will make the next change way better and way
Hmm.
easier.
Yeah, go forth,
Yes.
time it well,
Have
train.
fun. Change is not a thing, so you don't have to
Also,
worry about it.
that's a really good note to end this on. It is when you do this right, when you really get the process of
Yes.
like developing a training and
Yes.
thinking about how people are going to, and maybe this is just a personal interest, but I think it becomes much more fun. We've had
Oh,
teams
yes.
come to life who were already
Uh-huh.
excited about what they were trying to push through,
Yeah.
come to life on making the change like happen,
Yes.
and it's very exciting to see people actually engage on what needs to be engaged so that they can be
Yeah.
successful in a change they were excited about, but would
Hmm.
otherwise potentially lose their energy for because they're not supporting it, not able to support
Yeah.
it, not thinking about it in a way that
Yeah.
will be supportive to them and others. But the second you kind of change this mindset, it's really cool to see the engagement, a lot easier to
Hmm.
be engaged.
Yes. Yes. And it spreads like fire too.
Yes,
So it's
we'll get
very cool to
excited.
see that. And it all comes back to like, can I see myself in this future that I'm being told?
Hmm.
If you can't, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
All right. Thanks for listening.
thanks for listening.